So what I'm talking about today is I'm having an interview with Twang Darkly, and they're holding a concert at the Caddo Common Park today, uh, tonight at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And they're playing. They describe their music as rural space music, and they create some of their instruments like by hand. It has a very unique sound. I can say that I personally have never heard music like it, and till I met Michael Futrell, the band leader, back in 2015. We'll talk a little bit about that in the interview, but it was a really good interview. And this is a free concert, guys, and that's happening again 7 to 9. That is 861 Texas Avenue. That is in the Caddo Common Park near Shreveport Regional Arts Council's building, where that big Dalmatian statue is. Um, but yeah, there's also going to be food trucks at this event, so that's also something to do. Music starts at 7:15. You're welcome to bring, a blanket to sit on, some chairs, bring the family out, and just sit back and enjoy the music. All right, let me go ahead and get you guys over to that. So, during this one, I will pause and there will be a short commercial break at some point during the interview. But also, following the interview, I recorded them in our studio with a live, a kind of concert, a mini sample of what they create. And it's a really cool session. So I hope you stick around after my interview to listen to that session. It's quite an interesting experience, and they are very talented musicians. All right, guys, go ahead and enjoy. I know I enjoyed this conversation. Hello, this is ArkLaTex Artistry, where we explore the arts in our area. Today's guests are unique musicians that play out of this world music. That's what I would say it is, which is unlike anything but can soothe the soul. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi there. I'm Michael Futrell. This is,
Joel Boltinghouse.
and we are two-thirds of Twang Darkly. Our drummer, who's not here with us today, is Lane Bayless. A lot of folks in the community will know him. And as you say, we play rural space music.
Yeah, very out of this world. And I always loved your music. First, before we get started with the questions, Michael, I met you at a breakfast that was held by Art Space to introduce us as new roster artists. And this was like in 2015.
I think it would have been 14 or 15, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite some time ago. And I remember during that time you told me about your music. You were looking for, at the time, artists to collaborate visually with your stuff. And I ran home that day and I went and I looked you up and I started listening to what you had, and it was very captivating.
Perhaps we need to collaborate then.
I'm very happy to have you here, and maybe a collaboration would be awesome to have. I remember you collaborated with Steve Zawowski, and I went to that show that was at the Meadows Museum.
That's right. That was a really fun multimedia exhibit we put together. I took a lot of photographs of his artwork, and he put together this exhibition of his artwork there. And I used the photographs to create original animations from his artwork, which we projected on the wall, and I composed a suite of music around it called The Court of King's Cabal.
Yes, I love Steve's work. So when y'all collaborated, I remember going to that. It was such a great experience. I just wanted to let you know that I enjoyed.
It was fun for me as well.
It was one of my most memorable exhibits I've been to in Shreveport Bossier, in my opinion.
Well, thank you.
So I understand that you guys have an event coming up. Can you tell me a bit about that event?
We do. On September 20th, we are going to be performing down on Texas Avenue, 869 Texas Avenue at the Caddo Commons Park, which is this great public space right next to Shreveport Regional Art Council's headquarters down there. I got a great sort of performance pavilion, a nice bank where folks can hang out. And we're going to be giving what we're calling the Concert at the Gates of Dusk.
Oh, that's
So we're going to start playing at sunset. We're just going to put on a show with our original music plus some interesting covers, I think, that people will find compelling. So we're looking forward to that. There should be food trucks on the scene as well, so it should be a good evening out, a free concert the night of September 20th. Food trucks will start selling stuff around 7, I think. Sunset is around 7:15, so that's when we'll
Nice.
start playing.
I think it'll be a great ambience with the music that I know you play. It's gonna be a great atmosphere.
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely, it's an experience not to miss out on. So, how do you guys think that? And I want to hear both of your opinions on this. Well, how do you think events like this one that you're having benefit our community?
You want to go first, John?
Well, I mean, I think free performances are great because, just everybody could come, There's no, tickets or gates or sold out or anything like that. It's just open and hopefully what I always like is kind of like the random people that didn't know about the event but hear the music or something like that.
And
It
then
kinda
they
reminds me
wander.
of-
And,
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of just like Mardi Gras, it's just on the street for everybody,
Yeah.
and that's a really neat thing about the place. We've never played there, so I'm really excited to play there. I remember when they were building it and just seeing it come, along in its construction. So, it's neat, and again, the free outside thing and just that whole area is just, there's been other events there in that neighborhood and stuff by the historic Memorial Coliseum, is it?
yeah,
Yeah.
where
Long
Elvis
and
played.
storied.
Yeah, Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and all those guys. So it's just really neat. And I think going back to your question, I think arts is it's like soul food. It's just good for people to hear and see things. It may not always be their cup of tea. It might be weird or whatever or challenging, but I think that's important for the community, just to show that we're more than just a mall and a restaurant. There's things that people do and create and put their hearts and souls into, and to be able to have that out in the public like that, I think is important and special.
It definitely is, and I'm really happy they created that space. And it really is in a part of town where there is a lot of thick history for, music in general and arts. And, I feel like the fact that we can have musicians like you guys come in and play that stage near all of that, and maybe people can learn more about it while they're here, because I feel like a lot of people in Shreveport don't know the rich history of Shreveport. Even people that have lived here, lived here all their lives, just did not know that certain things have happened here.
It's true. And I think, building on what Joel was saying about the importance of free and public art, I think public art in general is something that is valuable to community and a society more generally, especially, in a time in which, there are forces that are trying to stifle art, like to crack down on the Smithsonian and things of this nature.
Yeah.
Defunding public media that are places that are have been venues for art. It's important that there is public art that is ongoing, that's community produced. I think, and irrespective of whether folks hear us in particular, being part of sort of the community of voices that is creating real art in front of people, I think is really valuable in order to show that art doesn't have to be approved. It's something that's performed and lived.
And I think, maybe one feels uncomfortable, but maybe that's kind of the point sometimes. If an art challenges you, maybe it'll broaden your mind if you sit and you just take it in, right? You know, I think that's, and it is sad to see a lot of the like cuts to funding to things that really help artists, and you know, yeah, I have a lot to say about that that I'm not gonna get into, but it's rough out there for artists, and to give us spaces and venues like that one for us to perform in is great.
And we have to really thank the Shreveport Regional Arts Council for this event. They're sponsoring it as part of what they call their roster revelry. Roster revelry. That's really hard to say. We're appreciative that they're supporting this kind of public art in our community.
I am happy for it too. They really have, you know, for as long as they've been open, have been pushing the arts here very hard. So them and Bossier Arts Council are both valuable resources to all of us. So where did music originate for you both? Like, where did it start in your lives?
Joel, you want to go first?
I'm the third of 4 children, and growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was just the radio was on, FM hits, pop hits, and I remember my sister would she had like a cassette deck, before media was easy and affordable to get, and a favorite song would come on, and I remember she had a sign on her door that said, I'm recording, and she put the cassette tape recorder in front of the speaker, and when a song would come on, she would record it, so she could hear it over and over again. And I just remember, just it being something cool and valuable. And my parents, encouraged music with my family. I started taking violin. My siblings played piano, and when I was 12, I started playing guitar and started to. I took some lessons and started to learn, try to play along with things on the radio and things like that. So it's always been, a part of my life as just like a fan. And then it was neat when I got my first guitar, just to try to play along with things, and I was never good enough to, try to play like the Van Halen or any of that type stuff. So I just kind of did my own thing, and I just, so I guess that just being a fan of music, pop music, and that grew, into jazz and, country and classical and, weird world music, I guess they would call it, and stuff. So yeah, it's always been a part of my life, and and I say I like music, and I go, okay, like, no, I like music, I'm a super fan, I geek out, and what album was recorded where, and what bass player played on this, and then that dude left the band, and all that stuff. So I'm really, really into it, and I have been for decades.
My story's fairly similar, and I actually recall recording things like the King Biscuit Flower or off the radio in the way that you're describing. And I was the third of child in my family as well, but the last one in mine. But I had 2 older brothers, whose musical interest, had some impact on me. I mean, the first thing I recall liking as a kid in the 70s was Johnny Cash. Like, I was really into Johnny Cash. I played those on the 45s on my little record player in the room and stuff. And I remember my brothers telling me, "That's not cool. You need to listen to rock." But I always kept liking Johnny Cash nonetheless. But growing up in the 70s and 80s was a really, a nice time to. It was pre-internet, and you had to kind of geek out on music if you wanted to follow it. You had to really sort of search and dig and try to figure out what was going to be on the radio. Can I record it? If you could find a concert or something of artists you like. In the 80s, I got really into Dire Straits and Bruce Springsteen and these kinds of things. And from from there somehow I stumbled onto Jethro Tull, which led me down this rabbit hole of British folk music.
Ah.
And British folk music, it turned out dovetail with another interest of mine, which has to do with these instruments that I build and play called dulcimers, which you find in the Appalachian Mountains. And Appalachian music is basically, folk music of the British Isles that got left out in the woods for a really long time and mutated into its own kind of interesting thing. So it has that string of influence in it, but it also has this, surprisingly for some people, this African connection, because the banjo is an African instrument.
Yeah,
It comes to
I didn't
America
know that actually. Wow.
from Africa by way of slaves.
Oh, wow.
And so there's this thread of influence into Appalachian music as well. And so throughout the 80s, as I was sort of listening to more broadly scoped world music, as Joel would say, I was discovering all these interconnected tissues between the various musics of the world, and it really fascinated me. And I remember going to university, I finally had a big library access. I would just dig through those stacks. Nothing to do with my coursework or whatever, but always looking to geek out and find this, ethnomusicology sort of material. And
I mean, that's artists, right? We'll go to school and completely distract ourselves with with the art instead.
Yeah. When I was in graduate school, graduate degree in sociology, I remember they give you these sort of, the faculty will give you progress reports on how you're doing. And I recall my first one said something to the effect of, doing okay, but seems overcommitted to outside goals, which is their way of saying I was playing too much music.
Well, that just means you already had a path, right, that you were bound for.
Yeah.
And, that should be encouraged when you see that kind of passion, I think, in a student, right? You want to encourage when they have that passion, that, like, this is what you should go for. Because, working in life, we all need to work, but the passion, being able to do our passion in life is what keeps us happy, right?
For sure. I think, a lot of people sort of these days maybe get caught up in this idea they have to monetize whatever they're doing and make it into some kind of hustle. It is great to be paid, for your art, and I certainly don't want to discourage anybody from doing that when they can. But if you're an artist, you have to make art, whether you're getting paid for it or not.
Exactly. Don't let not making money stop you from doing the art, because it's about the art before it is the money.
Right.
And I think a lot of, folk art, folk music and all that, it's just made to be, an audience of one, you know what I mean? All the outside artists and stuff like that just, sometimes they're discovered after they die, and they just had this passion and they did it, and it's just amazing stuff, It's not like, oh, what will the public like? What will sell? What will be popular? It's just like, I just do it. It's like breathing, and just see, and that's the way I see Michael's songs and our music and stuff. It's just, we know it's not, going to be the most popular stuff. We're not going to be, playing at the casinos, playing, Sweet Home Alabama. We're doing our own vision and our own things and stuff. And I'm not putting Sweet Home Alabama down, and those artists, the musicians that play that music. But it's just, it doesn't speak to my soul like, what we do and a lot of other artists visually and musically and such that, just do it, again, just because they have to.
I think creating from originality is what really makes an artist an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Like creating from themselves, sure, we're going to have influences. I think that's unavoidable. Yeah. We all have some kind of influence, but creating from you is the most important thing. Like, your truest art is going to come from yourself,
Yeah, for me, I think influence is not something that I really think about much. There are artists I enjoy, and by, engaging with their art, it becomes part of me, and that, maybe comes back out in various ways.
Yeah.
But I think it's a real danger, as you're alluding to artists, if they're trying to recreate what somebody else is doing. Oh,
exactly.
I'm going to do this kind of thing because they did that kind of thing. That's a path that leads you away from artistry.
It's a path that leads you. You're no longer doing it for yourself. You're not creating from your own creativity yourself. And I feel like a lot of times that's lost on people nowadays. It feels like people are just trying to replicate things, but like maybe you should be trying to break free of all of that influence and create your own thing. You
Yeah,
know?
and I kind of think, it seems like maybe people do, want to be imitative, but I think there's plenty of artists out in the world making real art as well. They just
Yeah,
are,
there are.
kind of running a little under the radar, especially in sort of an environment in which you have this algorithmically generated
yeah.
amplification of things that are imitative.
Exactly.
Things that are going to get, quick hits and, drives what people are most likely to see if they just sort of tune in briefly, looking for music or visual art or whatever. But if you dig deeper, you'll find there's real art out
Oh
there.
yeah, there definitely is. I think that's why shows like the one you guys are about to perform are pulling in people around locally, where they hear the music and they come in. It's not an algorithm controlling anything. And
Definitely not.
I think that's why people should get out and go to these kinds of events, because you're not going to discover anything new if you're just sitting on TikTok listening to the same video, just different people over and over again, right?
Right.
So, what inspired the genre that you guys now play?
Well, we call what we do rural space music. And, that's really not a thing, right? Except, it's what we call what we do. And, the inspiration for it in part comes from an artist we admire greatly, a jazz musician of the 20th century, a fellow from Saturn, in fact, Sun Ra. And Sun Ra played famously space music. And, in an interview, once he basically said that, what he likes about space is that in space you're free, you can move in any direction. And that kind of idea speaks to, I think, how we approach music. We don't really feel bound by the idea of genre. So we go where we want to go.
Kind of just create your own, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, things that keep recurring themes and motifs and kinds of sounds. I play instruments in part that are inspired by, Appalachian instruments. So there's going to be a kind of an element of that kind of flavor in there, but I don't feel as an artist bound to I'm trying to recreate this tradition.
Yeah.
That tradition is valuable, and I'm glad there are people who are versed in it and steeped in it and seek to perpetuate it. But traditions are also alive. And the only reason we have, say, the mountain music and the Appalachian music we have today is that people made music. And they made music themselves. It was connected to things they had heard before, but, the dulcimer as an instrument has only existed since, the 19th century. And it was invented by people in the mountains based on some instruments they sort of brought with them from Europe, but changed to sort of fit their circumstances. And the music that evolves out of that, and the banjo, which, as I mentioned, comes from Africa, etc., these are traditions that get intertwined into these new things that continue to evolve. So in a sense, I think what we do, is maybe an evolution of that, but until the box set comes out posthumously, maybe people won't know that.
But it's funny, just as far as genre and stuff, there's been a number of times when, while we're playing, between a song, someone will come up and say, "What kind of music is this?" And we're like, "It's music. I don't know. What do you want to call it?"
Yeah.
Using the instrument and creating the sound that you want to make with how it sounds, right? And that's creating your own unique flavor of things, right?
A funny story. Once we played at we've played many times at the farmer's market in Shreveport, in fact, but this was about 10 years ago, maybe even longer, 12 years ago. And there was this woman listening to us, and she seemed to be enjoying it. She stayed there for, maybe half hour listening to us play. I was playing a lot of dulcimer music that day, and she came up during our break to tell me that she was really enjoying it, and she said, you know, her husband had a dulcimer and this kind of thing, and we were very enthusiastically talking about it, and she asked me, well, where did these songs that you're playing today come from? And I said, well, this was all original material, and she huffily said, well, I only like real mountain music, and stalked off.
Oh, what?
So
Wow, that's not like giving credit to an artist where it really matters. Like you just want to listen to the stuff that was already created, but here you are enjoying
yeah.
So now
an
we just say that-
original art.
Yeah, now we just say everything's the Oak Ridge Boys.
Might be easier to convince people, you know, to enjoy it, right?
I would like to clarify, we will not be playing any Oak Ridge Boys songs at our show on September the 20th.
That's good.
Don't
So,
anybody feel misled.
okay, guys, so here's that short commercial break, and we will be right back. This is a long interview, so there might be another one before we do the mini concert. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but we'll be right back and right back into the interview from here. Oh, tell me about y'all's instruments. I know that some of these are handcrafted.
Right. This one, for instance, is what I call my electric gourd, but it's also an acoustic instrument. This is built from a gourd.
Oh, wow.
It's played with a slide.
And there's a
Very
dragon on
nice.
it.
I was seeing that. I really
Yeah,
love that.
That is actually something I snagged
Can you hold it
out-
up a little more?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's really nice.
I snagged that out of Tove Jansson, the Moomin's artist. She did a Lord of the Rings calendar many
Oh,
years ago,
wow.
and this was her version of Smog, so I cut it out of the calendar and stuck it on here. So I
Had a
liked it
little
so much.
collage on it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I've got a few others here to show you. This is another gourd instrument. In fact,
Oh, that's
this
so
gourd
cool.
is the other half of the gourd that one's built
Oh,
from.
wow.
So these are, like, I split this giant gourd in half and made two instruments from it. And this one, I play fingerstyle.
Very
That kind of
nice.
thing.
I love the sounds.
Yeah. So
That's really
there's a
cool.
tradition in Appalachia of making musical instruments from whatever materials you have on hand. So gourds are often used, old coffee cans, any kind of thing you can imagine. Stove piping is used in mountain banjos quite frequently.
Oh, wow.
For the tone, what amounts to the tone ring over which they stretch maybe a groundhog hide or something like that. So
That's really cool.
I grew up in eastern North Carolina, but we would always go up to the mountains, on these sort of summer trips in the 70s and 80s, and I'd see dulcimers everywhere, like usually hanging on walls. I rarely saw. Every now and then you come across somebody playing, but usually you just kind of see them hanging up,
Yeah.
whatever. But I was always really intrigued by it, and as I, was able, I don't know, maybe like 1987 or something, I finally got one of them. Then I bought one that was hanging on a wall, and started to learn to play it. And again, this is pre easy access to things like tutorials online and stuff. So a lot of what I would do with it, came out of my own, well, this is what it can do. I'm just going to figure it out. And so like Joel was describing, rather than ultimately playing other people's stuff, I, came up with my own sort of approach to doing stuff. But through time, as I needed instruments to play, especially electric instruments, electric dulcimers and stuff, I don't have any of those here with me today. I realized if I wanted some of the things that I wanted to play, I was going to have to build them.
Yeah.
So I taught myself to build stuff.
Which is an art of its own.
Yeah.
Right? That is an
It's what I'm
entire
still
different
working on.
craft. Entire different craft, but it benefits your entire craft as a whole, right?
Yeah, and another thing I work with, things like bamboo. This
that's
flute
cool.
was built from a piece of bamboo grown here in Shreveport.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the first ones I built, I think. And sometimes I use gourds for flutes as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Something I've been trying to do recently. So these are kind of fun.
That's so
Gourd
cool.
flute. So anything I get a hold of that looks like it might be remotely in the shape of an instrument, I might try to make into one.
It's a lot of talent there, though.
It's a work in progress, and I
Look.
destroy as many materials as I manage to make into instruments.
Oh, I think
So-
that's an artist trait. We have so many. I think, like me and another artist was talking about. It's like every failure that we have is just a lesson,
Yeah, for sure.
right? So anytime we're failing, we're learning something. We may not realize it, but our brain's gonna pick that up and be like, "Not making that mistake again."
Yeah,
when you're crafting something new.
And I think what you're saying is an important part of an artist's mindset. You have to embrace failure.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, will say things like, "Oh, it must be nice to be so talented to be able to play music." Were you able to play music the first time you picked up a guitar? No, nor was I.
Not everybody's prodigies. I mean,
Right,
we could
we
wish.
worked for years to figure this stuff out. We played a lot of crappy sounding stuff to be able to play stuff that sounds nice.
Exactly.
Or to choose to play something that sounds crappy.
And the great thing about music is sometimes mistakes sound good,
Yeah.
Yeah, then you discover something else new.
Play it
you know.
twice.
Yep, play it twice. Call it jazz, right?
Well, that's awesome. So another question I did have is there any stories behind your albums and your music?
Oh, for sure. And they vary from album to album. We talked earlier about the collaboration I did with Steve Zivlowski, The Court of King's Cabal. I put out an album of music based on stuff that I wrote for that exhibit. So that stuff was all kind of geared towards his weird vision, and that was kind of the inspiration there. And it dovetails nicely with the kind of weird inspirations we often work with anyway. And during that period in particular, we were listening to and talking about Sun Ra a lot, so the whole space music thing was on our minds.
That's awesome.
So that came up in an album we did around the same period, a Twang Darkly album called Nebula, which is pretty spacey.
And we did a whole one on Mars.
Yeah, and back in 2015, we did a piece called Martian Archaeology.
I think that might have been the one that I first heard myself personally.
Yeah, that was around the time we met, for sure.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, in part inspired by a lot of the reading I was doing at the time. I read a lot of sort of pulp science fiction from the early 20th century, and a lot of that stuff was, you know, set on Mars, but this kind of speculative, like Mars, of, you know, sort of vanishing civilizations, and, you know, this older than Earth, older than
It's like, you consider it sci-fi, but at the same time, you consider, like, if there was a civil, it would be older than us. So it's more historical than it is futuristic, but it's still sci-fi to us. And I think that is a perfect blend with the instrument styles you have.
Yeah.
But in a spatial theme, I love that, that combination.
It spoke to me, and at the same time, I spent summers quite frequently. I spent some time out in Nevada, and I like to hike out there, and there are all these red rocks out there. So I'd taken a lot of photographs of interesting rock formations, a lot of close-up photographs and stuff, and I got to looking at these, and I thought these look, you know, like Martian landscapes.
It really
so I ended up
does.
creating sort of a set of short animated films from those photographs.
I think I've seen those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
because
used
it really
those
does
in our
look like
shows.
Mars.
Yeah. So it was this kind of multimedia concert in which each piece had sort of a little short film that went along with it, with animations and stuff. So, and ultimately the inspiration there was not only those stories about Mars, but how those stories eventually sort of came into conflict, if you will, with sort of our discoveries about Mars.
Yeah.
When the Viking landers and et cetera, you know, finally set down on Mars. I remember seeing the first picture sent back from the Viking landers in, I think it was 76 or 77 or so, and being struck by, you know, this desolate sort of landscape.
Yeah.
And those stories stopped being written around that time because, you know, now we had this new vision of Mars as this desolate.
Well, I think that
place.
people often don't take into account how quickly things deteriorate. You know, we as humans have only lived we've only been involved for, 20,000? The planets themselves are millions of years old. And we look at things that are only, like, as old as we are as a human race, and they're so worn down or so covered in earth
We
that they're
forget
just
so
gone.
much. Everything is lost to us.
Yeah.
So
And
that tension between, you know, imagination and discovery is kind of what that album was about.
And the whole disintegration of sound and sight and stuff. As a guitar player, I really like, you know, kind of the lo-fi, the kind of, you know, just things that are like almost like dreamy, you know.
The
am I really-
surreal.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And so that's what I try as a guitar player to do, add a lot of that texture to the songs, just to kind of put it in space, to put it, you know, I don't know, just color it a certain way, you know.
Yeah.
I don't play, you know, the typical, you know, Eddie Van Halen riffs, you know. I just kind of put textures and sometimes noisy type stuff on top of it, which I think, you know, going back to the archaeology of it all and the history and stuff, it just kind of, you know, it's very inspirational, you know, from musically for me.
Yeah, and I'm really lucky to have somebody so creative as Joel to partner with in making this music.
sometimes it's the collaborators that really inspire directions that we need.
Sure.
Me and my husband, we write fantasy sci-fi stuff, and if it wasn't for him, like, I was like, when I first started writing Passing in Time, which is the name of my multiverse, when I first started writing it, I was like 13 years old, and I was just like coordinating role plays where I would just write story and people would just interact with the situations I was creating, and it wasn't until he came in that he actually started writing with me. And then we were creating things together, creating all these races, these worlds, these, storylines, and without the collaborations, sometimes certain things just wouldn't exist the way we want them to, right?
It pushes you into new spaces that you don't necessarily see coming. It's where discovery and creation can really thrive, I think.
Yeah, it's important for artists to Andy Warhol and Basquiat, they collaborated well, and so much came from that. I mean, I don't think we would have had we wouldn't have seen them as much if we didn't have those kinds of collaborations going on. They made waves, and sometimes it takes more than one artist to do that.
For sure.
So what's your process for creating a new song?
There is probably as many processes as there are new things that we play. But quite typically, my process is to have a half-baked idea and then show it to Joel, and we play.
We 3/4 bake it.
Yeah. We never want to bake it too much because, every time you perform it, it gets to sort of be recreated anew. So,
and then Lane will throw in an odd drum beat, on top of something and stuff. Yeah, so I mean, we've come up with things like on the spot. We will play. Michael will get a flute and he say, just do something weird in F sharp, minor. And I'm like, okay, and we'll just improvise.
Joel's always ready to play something weird.
Jam session, something new, right?
We'll do that in front of people. We'll do that, and sometimes it's awesome, and sometimes it's okay, but and that's all right. Going back to mistakes and stuff, we're free. We don't have a contract, and we have to do this and get people dancing and sell this many beers and tickets and stuff. So we do it, and so I think some of our songs are just improvisation. One of our favorite songs, I think we've only done once. We recorded it live on Texas Avenue at the old Mini Cine place. And we just kind of built it live while Steve was doing art on a projector behind us and stuff.
An overhead projector,
Yeah.
I feel like I may have seen that.
Yeah. It was it Art Walk? What was going on?
It happened on an Art Walk night, I think.
Yeah.
But it was another Shrek-sponsored event that we got a grant to do.
Huh.
But that's one of our
It
favorite
sounds
songs.
very familiar. I feel like I've seen that.
I just listened to it the other day.
New Research in Rural Space Music was the name of that event.
Okay, yeah.
Ah,
But the
it
song
sounds
is
familiar.
Excavation in C sharp minor or something.
Live recording session.
Yeah.
So.
So, but
I think I may have seen the video.
yeah, and Michael, because it was done, normal, a lot of takes and stuff. So going back to the disintegration and weathering, and he made just this really neat video of us doing the process, and we'll kind of drift in and out of the screen. It's really mystical.
I overlaid various takes because that's what we were doing that day. We were just running through these improvisations and then overdubbing stuff on top of them.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool, and that's we did that once, and I've never really done it again. So and that's what's exciting to me, is just kind of coming up with these things where it seems like are we just improvising and noise and just doing all this stuff, and then we'll play a song where we all three turn on a dime. We're really tight. And that's kind of neat, because sometimes I think bands are one way too much or two other way too much, and I like that we have songs that are this is how the song goes and that's it, and then others where we'll be able to improvise on that theme and stuff. So it's a really I like as a musician that it's not the same every night. We have songs, but we rarely perform songs the same way twice.
I think that's more of a reason to go to those concerts, because you never know, while you be out there experiencing an art show and just see something you'll never see again, something like wondrous, and that is an experience you have because you went there and saw it yourself.
I mean, that's the beauty.
Okay, guys, so here's the second commercial break. Like I said, this one's a long one, and we still got a little bit more, and then we still got the performance. So stick with me, guys, and we'll be right back after this commercial with the rest of this video. It's been a great it was a great conversation. As you noticed, we kept talking a lot. They are part of my art group, Lab Rat Arts. So Steve, who they're talking about, is also part of the same group. That's why you hear a lot about them collaborating. Is they are essentially, we are a team of artists that have done various art projects and collaborations, and we're looking to start. Hopefully, we need to kick off our monthly meetings again, and we used to hold artist trading card nights. That's where artists can come and make trading cards. Steve would bring an entire suitcase of just trading card shaped card stock and a bunch of art supplies, and we'd create trading cards, and then we'd trade them, so we have many pieces of art, and we each have binders where we could just save those art pieces in our little binders, and collect from different artists and things that we like, or make a bunch and then trade them with other artists so we can get their work. It's a really cool concept, and if we kick it off, it'd be cool to have that again. But yeah, let me get y'all to that commercial, and after this we have the concert.
Live music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of songs or pieces as frameworks on which that we can hang various kinds of sounds. There's recurring motifs that make them a piece that we know this is, whatever piece. We move by uncertain stars, or whatever it's called. So it's recognizable, but at the same time, it's going to do what it does that night when we perform it. And I think we all three really enjoy that aspect of making music. So it's kind of a jazz sort of approach. I don't think most people would recognize what we're doing as jazz, because it doesn't necessarily use sort of some of the same sounds, doesn't use the same palette.
But it still does have a similar feel at the same time.
There's an improvisational element to what we do quite frequently that makes us sort of jazz adjacent.
It's like a space folk jazz.
Yeah, world space music.
There you go. So, what advice would you give to someone trying to develop their own unique sound in their music?
I'm just follow your muse, just be, I mean, and there's great musicians, there's great artists that really want to paint or act or play like a certain person, and that's a craft, that's artistic, that's wonderful and stuff. But if you really want to try to be unique, just do it, just don't, again, make yourself happy, write and play and perform and paint for the audience of one, make yourself happy, and hopefully, you'll come up with your own unique thing, because, everybody can, sound like the Beatles or whoever, and again, the Beatles are amazing, not putting anyone down, but the Beatles already happened, do your own thing. And so yeah, just do your own thing, follow your own muse, get creative, try not to learn, Led Zeppelin songs, do Scott Johnson songs or whoever, Joel Boltinghouse songs, just do your own thing, and then that's why, I think Michael and I are very similar in that way, where we never had like that, I want to be like Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix. I don't think either of us as musicians wanted to do that. We just kind of did. There's people that I admire and I like, and some of my favorite guitar players, but I've rarely like gone and tried to learn those songs or even that style. Of course I'll, stylistically I'll go, oh, well, they do this or that.
Learn techniques that improve what you're creating, but not trying to replicate. So just do your own thing, and don't worry, or don't try to get clicks or hits or bites or TikToks or whatever, because most people just want a can of Coke. They don't want anything weird.
Most people think they want a can.
They think, but then once they experience the unique thing, then they realize that there's something they've been missing out on.
And because that can of Coke was originally original thing, and then people are like, oh, let's try to sound like this person. So I think it's more interesting to be the innovator, the first can of Coke, the first Beatles, the first whatever, instead of trying to just be a copycat.
That goes with trying to be as original as you can.
Right. I think as an artist, it's important to chase inspiration and not success. If you're chasing success, you're going to be trying to do what's popular, what you think is popular, what you think people will respond to. And if that's your game, then as Joel says, you can develop really good craftsmanship with artistry, but you won't ultimately be following sort of your muse, and it doesn't leave you a lot of room for being creative.
I see that actually a lot. You'll see people that have gotten really popular, like because they did things that people wanted them to do. But then after they've become really popular, got all this money, all this fame, suddenly they're like, I'm done. And then you see them, I'm doing music now. And they're doing something they love. I guess, like, in the end, even if you do try to replicate what people want, in the end, you're going to get so burnt out doing what you don't, what you're not passionate about.
It becomes a job.
And then you're going to end up finding your path anyways, especially, I guess, once you have the money that you can just do whatever you want.
Success is
it's
great.
a nice luxury. I mean, one of my favorite recent examples of that is the Andre 3000 from the Outcast.
I love Andre.
He did an album of all instrumental
I love
flute
it.
music.
I love it.
That's so cool.
Nobody expected that, but it's like he did what he wanted to do. Screw all the other, opinions. He just did what he wanted, and, people may have hated it. Some people were surprised by it. Some people loved it. But the thing is, he did it for himself. And I really admired that.
Me too.
So
one last thing I would say about musicians being able to create original stuff that they're going to be proud of that you're asking about. I think it helps to have big ears too. There's this festival in Knoxville that happens every year called Big Ears, and it's all this weird. Some of it's weird, some of it's traditional. It's a very strange festival, but you could hear almost anything there. But the thing that sort of marks all the stuff that's happening is that it's art that belongs to the artists that are playing, and it
Yeah.
can be anything. And some of it is very surprising, in terms of how it sounds, and it's challenging, and like, oh, I never thought music could be this kind of thing. And if you encounter that kind of stuff as an artist, then it helps, break loose maybe sort of ruts you get in. Not that you're gonna do this thing that you've heard that's weird, but that it says to you, oh, this world is bigger than.
It's like, I remember that thing that was really strange that I heard.
Yeah.
If they can do it, I can do this,
For sure.
So, how could somebody follow you guys or hear your music on social media or wherever?
Well, they can look for Twang Darkly on Facebook. They can have a website, michaelfutrell.com, which maybe you'll put on the screen because nobody's going to be able to figure out how to spell my last name, I don't think.
Don't worry, I'll make sure to link everything.
Sure.
Everything's in.
And that has links to all our music where you can. We're on streaming platforms, Bandcamp, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube if you search for my name on there. There's a link you can share for that as well.
It's where I've seen a lot of your stuff. So.
There's probably close to 200 videos on there.
I also follow you on Spotify too.
Okay.
So I know that you guys have stuff there. I have some of your stuff on my playlist.
We didn't put our last album on Spotify. Spotify and other streaming services are a difficult thing for musicians.
They really are.
They've really devalued sort of what we do and made it into a commodity.
It's also concerning their approaches on AI and stuff recently. So.
Yes, and AI is become this sort of thing that sort of emulsifies all art and then can create for us these sort of approximations of art.
It just throws us in a grinder and spits out an amalgamation of what was our art, but claiming it is theirs. It's like, it's not your art.
You could probably go on and say, I want a folky Appalachian jazzy improvisational thing, and that'd be interesting to see. It might sound like Twang Darkly.
It might spit out an amalgamation of what was yours.
And that's the difficulty of participating in those platforms. Like if you put our music on Spotify, in order to be streaming on Spotify, you're essentially agreeing to feed your sound into that machine.
That's why I don't use any Adobe products, because Adobe basically forces you now, like, if you create anything in there, Adobe gets the rights to use it in their AI training.
How crazy is that?
Like, betraying all artists.
Yeah.
So, DeviantArt did the same. Betrayed us all.
Yeah,
It just took everything we had and secretly dumped it into
the music
AI.
platforms are the same. And you're seeing the fruits of that now. Like, they're starting to feed the products of those algorithms back into those platforms.
Yeah, no. People get tricked into listening to AI music. They don't even know it because their playlist will randomly turn it on.
Yeah.
And what's sad is saving them money is really the goal that they're making, right? And what sucks about that is we can't trust them, and even though those would be great resources to get our music into people's ears, it's hard to negotiate with that, with the artist having to sell their soul to this product, right? That's tough. But all right, so guys, next thing, we are going to listen to a performance by Twang Darkly. So thank you guys for talking to me, and everybody else, enjoy.